about the global community, and the global south was on the margins. So kudos to ORF for creating such a platform, created by leaders and intellectuals from the global south, for the global south, and for the global community. And thank you for also remembering the geography of Africa by creating the Kigali Dialogue and Cape Town Conversations. So I think we need to acknowledge that as our first starting point, that we are also capable of providing leadership and showing direction in a very fracturing world. Now, last year was important for the global south, and I would say for the global community, on two fronts, two major developments. India's G20 presidency and streamlining the agenda of the global south into the forefront of the global agenda. The two summits that Prime Minister Modi hosted within the confines of the G20 presidency, focusing on the global south, brought for the first time into sharp focus the issues pertaining to 85% of the global population into the mainstream of the global agenda. And we want to thank India for the leadership that you showed and for especially focusing the torch on the issues of the global south. Secondly, the admittance of the African Union into the G20 family. That was a major development where Africa now is also sitting side by side with the only other regional organization that occupied that space for the past 18 years. Took the world 18 years to recognize that Africa is an integral part of the world. So again, thank you, India, for mainstreaming Africa and bringing 1.4 billion people into the mainstream of the global community. Secondly, you had your most successful BRICS summit last year. I'm not saying this because I'm South African and we hosted the summit. Of course, that's part of the reason. But it was an important summit for two reasons. Firstly, the focus of the summit on expansion and the large number of countries from the global south that formed a queue wanting to join BRICS. And many ask why such an interest in BRICS after 15 years. But BRICS is a young global organization, but within 5 years of its founding, it was dialoguing with the global south. The G20, it took 25 years. I mean, the G7, what was G8 and back to G7, formed in 1975, and only in 2000, they started dialoguing with partners outside that family. And not of their own volition. It was we, the Africans, who went and knocked the door in 2000 at the Okinawa summit to say we want to discuss with you Africa's development. That is how the outreach started with then the G8. We, the Africans, opened that door to say you can't be a closed shop. And that is why BRICS recognized that we have to be inclusive. And when you have such a large number of countries wanting to be part of the family, it was natural that expansion took place. Now, apart from expansion, we also had the largest BRICS summit in terms of the BRICS outreach. 60 plus countries attended the BRICS outreach summit together with the BRICS leaders. And that itself is a vote of confidence that we in the South are doing something that is right, that appeals to the major part of the global community. So I think when you look at G20, BRICS, and the global south, we have an opportunity. Very often I'm asked the question, how do you, the three democracies, India, Brazil, and South Africa, sit with Russia and China in the same room? And I said, why don't you ask this question about the G20? Because you sit in the same room with them also and negotiate with Russia, China, and a monarchy as well. You have no problems there. So why do you make it a problem within BRICS? The fact of the matter is that many thought that the G20 summit last year will collapse. But India showed that it's possible for us, despite our differences and despite an increasingly polarizing world, that it's possible for the North and South to work together. Yesterday, I was being interviewed by a journalist from Japan, and he referred to India as the crossroads of the global south and north. Now, last year, following the BRICS summit and the success of the G20 summit, I indicated that India provides the stairway or the bridge between the north and south. And that's precisely because India doesn't suffer from a trust deficit. On the contrary, India has a trust positive image. And I believe that India and such like minded countries from the global south must lead the way in creating some mechanism where we can speak to each other. We do so as individual countries within the G20. Without us cooperating, you will not have a successful G20. And unfortunately, we live in an era of minilateralism. All of these minilateral bodies that have sprung up and continue to expand is precisely because we have rendered our multilateral global institution into a state of semi-paralysis, if not totally paralyzed. You don't have to look into what is happening in Gaza and the double standards being applied vis-a-vis Gaza, vis-a-vis Russia, Ukraine. And this is what we are fighting in the global south, to say we want a more inclusive, a more just, a more fair global order. We want to get rid of the global hegemons. There's no place for global hegemony anymore. We not only want a multipolar world, we want a multicultural world, we want a multi-civilizational world, we want a multiplex world. And this is what the global south is asking for. And we are saying that we are ready to dialogue with all, not just the south, north and south. And as this platform proves also, it's possible for us to come together. We may differ, we may discuss in a robust manner, but it's important for us to dialogue. And South Africa's own history demonstrated the power of dialogue. We are free today precisely because those that were once enemies spoke to each other. And in this fracturing world, it is important that we create a platform where we can speak to each other. The G20 is part of that platform, I believe, if utilized effectively, and all of us have the same mindset of working for the common good of humanity, irrespective of whether we're from the north or south. We are, after all, as India stated in its G20 presidency last year, we are one world, we are one family. We want one future. And the possibility exists, and I believe the time has come for the global south to lead that process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I now invite Mr. Vyacheslav Nikonov, First Deputy Chairman, Committee on International Affairs of the State of Duma, Russia.
My dear friends and colleagues, good morning. Actually, I'm in BRICS business for somewhat longer because we organized the first academic forum of BRICS in December of 2008, before the BRIC was started. And it were the intellectuals who started to discuss the agenda for BRICS and our future prospects. The idea was to bring together countries which are in the center of civilizations, ancient, trusted, tested by centuries and millennia. And here was India as one of the oldest, greatest countries on earth with population, of 1.5 billion people. There's China, ancient civilization with a population of 1.5 billion people. These were the countries which were leading the world in terms of economic growth. So it was a combination of developing economies as contrasted to the non-developing. Most of Europe is not developing. It was also a combination of civilizations Central Africa, Latin America, Eurasia, or as we now call ourselves, Euro-Pacific power. Russian civilization, which is also 1/8 of the surface of the world. So we viewed BRICS, and we still view, and we really appreciate BRICS as a combination of countries which are sovereign, which set their own agenda, which are free from someone's domination, which take into account the interests of each other, which do not impose their models of development on anyone, and which try to reach consensus. And that's what we've successfully been doing for a long time. And now BRICS is a success story. It accounts for almost half of the global population, over 40% of global GDP. It is much bigger now economically than G7, and it's moving forward. It's a force of the future. These are the BRICS of the future. And this is also the model of international relations of the future. It's not imposing someone's will. It's not about superiority complexes, which for the West are now much bigger than the West itself. It is about friendship, it's about cooperation, it's about synergies. And in my mind, it's also an instrument for eliminating the dividing lines. Well, we usually do not use in Russia the term global south to describe BRICS because we are not south. Russia is the most cold country in the world, you know. 2/3 of Russia is covered with ice 2/3 of the year. And the average temperature for Russia is -5 degrees Celsius. So what we are, what the terms we are using, and the concept we are in is the concept of global majority. There is a global majority which represents the countries, the continents, which share the BRICS values, which I mentioned. And this is an absolute, you said about 80%, yes, and we do belong to this 80% of this global majority. So these countries set the future for the world. They are setting agenda. I'm not so sure that G20 is as perspective because it is an organization already divided in the middle. There is now, you know, a ministerial meeting going on. It was held yesterday in Brazil. And there were no talks between our foreign minister and American or British foreign ministers. They are not in speaking terms. It's very hard to speak about synergies in the organization where half of the G20 is sanctioning my country and, you know, freezing foreign exchange reserves and actually eliminating globalization in any sense. So I'm not that optimistic about G20. I'm very optimistic about BRICS. And BRICS also has a vast outreach. Of Mr. Shukla said of that, and yesterday and last year we were also holding our academic forum in South Africa, and there are many countries of Africa participating there. But BRICS can be an umbrella for all major global organizations and regional organizations. It can be an umbrella for the African Union, can be umbrella for the Conference of Islamic States, especially now with the expanded BRICS. We've now got a huge Muslim influx. The countries which are now added to BRICS are also civilizational centers, the old ones, be it Ethiopia, actually the only African country which was always independent, except for a few times of Italian colonialism, or Egypt, the greatest civilization of the past, and I am so sure of the future as well. It's the Saudi Arabia, the heart of the Islamic world. It is with the most rapidly developing United Emirates. And Iran, which also represents an ancient Persian great civilization. Civilizations think of themselves as being self-sufficient. And no one can impose their will on civilization. No one can impose their will on Russia. Just impossible. Some tried. Hitler tried. Napoleon tried. But it's hard to defeat Russia in any sense, or submit it, or submit India, or submit China, or submit now South Africa after it got independence, or Brazil, which is the lead state for Latin America. And definitely, BRICS is very attractive for the global majority. The list of countries which are eager to join is over 30, 35. Unfortunately, Argentina is out for a time being. They'll have to wait then. But this is a very attractive model for many, and this is the way to cooperate with other nations, because we all share the same values of not just sovereignty, but also dignity, honor, belief in our countries, in our values. And this is a organization. It's not an organization. It's a meeting of the countries with the same value base, actually, which are common for the whole humankind. As for Russia, we are presiding in BRICS this year. There will be a BRICS summit in Kazan in October. And there will be like 200 events, of which Victoria, I think, will tell you in a short while. So you are all welcome to join. It's great to see our good friends from the previous meetings of BRICS in different formats in different countries. That will be an interesting presidency because 5 new members. We're still not sure how we're going to come to consensus with all of them, but we'll have to, and we will. So I think the synergies are enormous in every field: science, technology, food, energy, and it's all developing. It's all developing. It helps. Russia and India increased trade relationship fourfold in 2 years. Now Russia is India's 4th largest trade partner. And I think BRICS has a great future. It is a model for the future international system. And welcome to Russia. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to see so much interest at 7:30 in the morning in India. And those of you who are from India know nobody wakes up at 7:30 in the morning for a meeting. So it shows the level of interest and appreciation for this topic. We have a discussion on BRICS, G20, and in many aspects of the global order, and a really excellent panel here from 5 countries. I'll introduce them briefly to discuss some of these issues. I thought we only have about 45, 50 minutes. We run on a very tight schedule here, and so I thought I'd keep this quite conversational with the panelists at first, and then maybe we'll have time in for about 10, 15 minutes at the end to open it up for some questions. With us today, we have 5 very distinguished academics. Hoda Al-Qasami, from who's a computer science professor, I believe, at the New York University, Abu Dhabi. Daman Pakjami from Iran, who is with the Institute for Political and International Studies. Oliver Stoenkel, someone I've known for a while, from Fundación Getúlio Vargas, FGV in Brazil. Sarah Mosoetsa, who's CEO of the Human Sciences Research Council in South Africa. And last but not least, Victoria Panova from HSE University in Russia. Now, again, there's a lot to discuss. We've heard from two very distinguished BRICS country members. But I thought, let me start off with one of the new entrants to BRICS from Iran, Mr. Daman Pakjami. Maybe very quickly, why did Iran decide to join BRICS? And if you could please use the microphone.
A valid question. Well, actually, we heard from the distinguished speakers about the importance of BRICS. The term used by my friends, we call it the representation of global South or majority South or non-Western world. So if we look at the reasoning of the formation of BRICS, being exhausted, the global South or developing countries being exhausted of the existing international system, so the leading of these countries decided to establish a new fora which would properly and better represent them in the global system and trying to reform it to serve their benefits in a better way. All the objectives set for from the first summit to the recent one as the goals and objectives of BRICS are which are mostly critical of the current international system. So encouraged Iran to be a part of this bloc because Iran also being dramatically hampered by the negative impacts of the current international system, especially economic and financial. So it is among the few countries that has been suffered from the sanctions and misuse or abuse of the existing multilateral system, and its economy has lost a lot. So that's why that Iran is critical to the system. And when there is a forum, when there is a grouping, which also is echoing this criticism, so why not Iran being a member of them?
But if I can just follow up, what is that change to the international system that you think Iran would like to see? When BRICS was set up originally, it was or when it grew after the financial crisis, a lot of it had to do with reform of multilateral banking system, What would you we have a new development bank now. Would you like to see that more empowered, or would Iran be very active in that process, or what is the kind of institutional reform you think BRICS should be advocating for?
Well, this is, you touched upon the important aspects of what BRICS can do, or let's call it BRICS Plus. So actually, with the addition of the new 5 members, and I hope that all of them also would join the NDB. So I'm not going to say that NDB is going to replace IMF, but this is a good beginning. So if the global South or majorities, the global majority, they are not happy with the current payment mechanism in the world, so they try to establish their own. And this new mechanism like NDB or other tools that I hope would be further developed within BRICS, then would help them to either impose their own aspirations to the current system, or if they are not going to be reformed, then I would consider the new mechanism to be expanded by BRICS as an alternative to the current. So in that prospect, I think Iran would consider joining NDB or other tools and instruments that are established by BRICS, so that would be hopeful that through this there would be some forces of imposing first reform to the current system. But if they would not be ready to be changed, then they could be a good alternative to them.
If I can stay on the discussion on BRICS and maybe hear from our Russian colleague, Professor Panova, following the outbreak of conflict 2 years ago between Russia and Ukraine, we saw a world where there were food security challenges, there were energy security challenges, and Russia is a major exporter of both fertilizer. do you think BRICS is well equipped to help address these issues? We heard some of the things from Mr. Nikonov earlier about what BRICS is about. Do you think this is a good platform because these seem to be some of the major concerns in the global south?
Definitely. First of all, let me to come back to the start of your statement when you started talking about food and energy crisis and mentioning at the same time their special military operation. Allow me to remind you that problems started somewhat before that, and we had this peak of spike of prices in the middle of 2021. And this crisis, both of those crises, came out of their, among other problems, pandemic, certain climate problems, and also mismanagement of their global north and with regards to their policies towards those issues. So I would not be relating them, those two issues between. But when we talk about BRICS and its ability to solve issues of the kind, definitely it is nowadays the primary platform. I cannot be too pessimistic about the G20 as Dr. Nikonov is, also being Sherpa for the Women 20, because we're still trying to push through this mechanism, a number of ideas, and at least within the outreach platforms, on official track, it's a much harder task, and it is absolutely no-go for the officials not to be talking to each other and issues not to be solved. But it is a different issue on a track too, and probably it would be a possibility within the G20 to use the outreach formats in order to start pushing, their governments to be more cooperative and not to politicize this platform, because this is what Russia insists on. The G20 is a primary economic forum which cannot be and should not be politicized, because we need to solve problems that in fact brought it to life. That's one thing. With regards to BRICS, we've been working on most acute issues that are relevant for the global south, or I also prefer the term world majority, because as we remember, the term global south was introduced by the American thinker, one of the American left-wing activists, and does bear certain ideology within it. And it also means non-West. And we're not talking about non-West, we're talking about the countries of world majority that want to be sovereign, that look at sovereign development, that look at the constructive cooperation and dialogue. This is where BRICS has been quite successful, and in fact more successful than many other platforms or clubs that we've been seeing. That's why we see the BRICS expanding twice as big, and more countries looking for better partnership with it. And this is, we had the agricultural platform, a number of initiatives that came to life with the BRICS. We have an energy research platform that was brought to life, and the first research came out in 2020 during Russia's chairship in there. And we have an established STI platform, which also allows for advanced cooperation between our countries, but also behind, because what we're seeing now, there is a certain push or attempt to eliminate our possibility on the part of the global north to develop and to be advanced with regards to technologies. And this is a case for BRICS to actually surpass those obstacles. So not to mention NDB or other platforms that's also been established. So I think BRICS could be the best mechanism in order to push and to allow for development of issues that are acute and most important for countries of the world majority. Thank you.
If I turn to so pivot the conversation a little bit to the G20, we have people from the current G20 chair, Brazil, and the next one, South Africa. Maybe start with you, Oliver. What do you think Brazil is trying to prioritize this year as chair of the G20?
Thank you, Dhruva. So I think Brazil has been quite inspired by the Indian G20 presidency for its capacity to actually make this about much more than just one presidential or leadership summit. So there's, I think there's the attempt to position Brazil, obviously, and these are partly also efforts to project the host countries as relevant investment destinations, as relevant political actors, of course. I think that it's interesting when we compare BRICS to G20. My sense is that India, and sort of my conversations with the Indian diplomats over the past year, was that India prioritized the G20 over the BRICS, perhaps because it provided greater visibility. There was also, of course, some tensions last year when Brazil and India were somewhat skeptical vis-a-vis expansion. I think that may be in part due to status loss, because obviously status in part is due to exclusivities. So that once you open up, of course, that becomes somewhat more of an issue. But also because I think there's been, from what I gather, on both India, particularly India, but also to some extent Brazil's side, is this the idea that G20 is a useful mechanism to sort of non-alignment and equidistance towards the major poles of power. Whereas in an expanded BRICS, it's somewhat of an open question to what extent India can utilize, and Brazil as well, can utilize the grouping to pursue that route, to basically be more or less in the middle between sort of China and Russia on the one side and the United States on the other. So that's going to be, I think, the key thing to watch, is how is that going to play out. I also wanted to just briefly, before I come to G20, mention Argentina has not joined. I think Saudi Arabia still hasn't actually made a final decision. It's to put it quite frankly, I think they're still seeing what they can get from the Americans if they not join. Basically, it's a fairly transactional issue based on what I heard from the Saudis last week in Munich. So it may be that only 4 join, but I think this is a first step towards a much larger process. I think it was a close call. I was speaking to the Argentine decision makers about this. They could have just as well joined as well. I think they may join next year or 2 years from now, due to the still significant benefits that BRICS membership provides, be it a more direct access to China, to some extent a diplomatic life raft against Western pressure, which explains why BRICS membership has been so popular, irrespective of ideology amongst BRICS members. Now, the G20 Brazil is prioritizing the fight against inequality and global hunger, promoting sustainability, sort of greening of the economy. I think Brazil would like to project itself as a key player in the sort of post-energy transition as a provider of key materials in that sense, which is interesting because Brazil is also becoming a fossil superpower, actually. So that's Brazil, together with Guyana, Argentina, and Mexico, are on the way to producing more oil than Saudi Arabia today. So that's kind of an interesting parallel that's going on there. And the third issue is the reform of the international order, which of course is very tricky. And there's been an interesting debate in Brazil about whether or to what extent geopolitics should be included in the G20. Lula has lots of geopolitical ambitions, of course. He weighs in on these issues quite frequently, sometimes quite controversially, like last week about the conflict between Israel and Hamas. But there's also a perception that the more you bring in the geopolitics, the more difficult it will become to advance on these more technical issues, particularly when it comes to sustainability of the economy and fighting global hunger, because the geopolitical side makes cooperation in the G20 more difficult.
A quick follow-up, something you've been working on for a long time. In an expanded BRICS, does IBSA, India, Brazil, South Africa, become more relevant? Does it get? I mean, they've had side meetings usually at BRICS. Does that take on a life of its own?
So IBSA largely ceased to exist when South Africa joined the BRICS. The most important side meeting now is between foreign ministers and on the margins of the General Assembly. But there's been some attempts actually to relaunch the issue. I think, even though South Africa, I think, was sort of less opposed, but there's been, until the final hour actually, Brazil was sort of banking on India to lead the charge to delay expansion, and then the Indians sort of said, no, we're not going to oppose this, and then Brazil kind of was on its own and didn't want to kind of pursue. So I think there may be some potential for that to be relaunched. I think a lot of that will depend on the Lula-Modi connection. Brazil has the BRICS summit next year. That will be, and I think that's a key factor that shapes BRICS dynamics. South Africa faced a lot of pressure vis-a-vis the visit of the Russian president to the summit, which ended up not happening. The same question will emerge for Brazil. It has also organizing the COP next year. So I think there's also a bit of an issue of how much airtime there is for international issues. But I do think there's an interest in relaunching or emphasizing again the IPSA grouping between South Africa, India, and Brazil.
Sarah, speaking of South Africa, turning to you, South Africa has the chair of the G20 in the year following, after Brazil. What do you expect South Africa would want to prioritize?
Thank you so much, and let me also pay tribute to India and particularly this forum, and Samir and team have again outdone themselves. I think most of us in this room know that as South Africa we always lead, so we are expecting to lead very well and on a number of issues. But maybe let me just touch on 4 quick things, and I'll come back to this. I think first, I think the term Global South for us, we've always used it not as a geographical pinpoint, but rather as a political force that binds all of us. And I am certain that what Russia has also put out now as an alternative to Global South is in actual the Global South as we've always defined it, at least from the South African perspective. It is interesting that when we come to this discussion, whether South Africa, Russia, or there is BRICS, suddenly the issue around food security and fuel become the center stage. And I think for us as BRICS, we have always understood ourselves not as what does not unite us. We always come together as on issues that unite us. It is not food security that we've always argued. It is food sovereignty. And that has gone to the heart of challenging unequal food distributions and value chains. As you know, many parts of the global north are hogging that space, are also hogging the policy space. G20 or BRICS, it has never been either or. For us, it has always been both, and that is why we've always understood multilateralism in that sense. G20 South Africa, we want to emphasize the things that we've always been emphasizing inside our BRICS space, and welcome Iran. It is also about people-to-people exchange, by the way. First, it is 3 things very quickly. Technological advancements to deal with the digital divide. Yes, we need to talk about food security or food sovereignty. We need to talk about fuel, but let's not forget about the digital advancement space, and that's what I think we should be focusing on as South Africa. Secondly, science, research, and innovation, absolutely important. We saw what happened with the pandemic, particularly where we could not produce, or we were blocked to produce our own. And therefore, science, research, and innovation, particularly in the space of health and many other spaces, will be very important in defining our own questions around health, and not be dictated to based on where the resources lie in the space of science, research, and innovation. Finally, as you all know, and we're very proud as South Africa, that for us, it is not just about those issues that we can touch. It is also about global justice and global inequality, and Brazil is leading on the issues of inequality. But global justice remains an important pillar of what we also need to be focusing on, given the atrocities that are happening throughout the world. And I do not want us to dwell on the issues of Gaza, but it is important for us that as we democratize and as we are happy as countries, our neighbors are also, and the neighbors, again, not in geographical space, but political space, should also be safe. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful overview. And you mentioned so much on technology and science, which is why I want to bring in our last panelist here. You're a computer scientist. You're focusing on technology. Do you know, one of the big questions, and it's come up in the last few days in the Raisina Dialogue, is, how will some of these emerging technologies be governed? What are the best ways to govern it? What are, multilaterally, diplomatically, and so forth? What do you see a role for the BRICS, a bigger role for the BRICS in playing that? And do you see the G20, just because of its inclusive nature, as a forum for governing some of the future of technology on the issues you work on?
A great question, Dhruva. I think one of the most important aspects to know here is that, thank you once again for the ORF and the organization standing behind it to make this dialogue facilitated at a grander level. And not just by us being in this room, but by embodying the importance of democratizing access to development. And this is what emerging technology stands for. It stands for the fact today that it's a wake-up call, it's a global wake-up call when we are discussing emerging technology past the pandemic, because we have lived in different realities globally that showed us the limitations, the global limitations that existed, as Sarah just described, when it comes to having resources, but not having the ability to use these resources to sustain your own sovereign independence of building specific economic efficiencies that are mandated, necessary within specific situations. And emerging technology comes as efficiency builders. And as I think a mean of building solutions to get us through crisis and to build for those, very necessary total factor of productivities that we seek in different economies. Build for a new capacity, new access to market, new access to capital, new access to trade routes. And if we don't master the whole stack development around emerging technologies, then we stand to be in a very vulnerable position for the longer run. So, the BRICS and the G20 is one of those platforms that came into action to make sure that we use our resources, multilateral resources, to develop pragmatic solutions, as Victoria has just stated, and not just political solutions, but solutions that have concrete actions on the map to open trade routes across different boundaries. One of them also are those science and development capacity building exercises that exist across different countries to address access to new emerging economies and market, like the energy market, for example, and the new smart cities and mega cities kind of investments that exist today. You could see, I would say, a new development cycle when it comes to technology that existed today that we did not have in the past. When we are discussing today semiconductors development, we're considering alternative routes that did not exist in the past prior to the pandemic. We're also discussing the ability to build these kind of small manufacturing hubs in Africa and different parts as well of the BRICS and the G20 regions to make sure that we can amplify our collective power by as well empowering sovereign development of those emerging technologies. We're talking about new markets that are based in new global hubs like Dubai, like Saudi Arabia, when it comes to Web3 development, when it comes to crypto markets. And I know that we're discussing fragile markets here because emerging technologies are immature technologies most of the time. They stand to have high potentials. They have weak regulations. technology in general is a problematic aspect when we are discussing governance, because we don't have collective global governance hubs that are responsible of making sure that we build, for example, ethical components or components that have direct societal, I would say, positive impact. But we are learning and we are changing our means and making sure that we don't just embody this one-size-fits-all policy, but we are maximizing the voices that comes from global south. For a longer part of the conversation, when we discussed governance platforms, if we took AI as an example, we always looked up into specific countries around the globe to produce their own AI, for example, regulation or governance structures for us to take suit. But that's actually in reality is not what was happening. We've seen countries like China putting these AI measures onto the map, putting different structures that, and we've seen as well the Asian countries within Singapore, within Indonesia, within Philippines, taking advanced regulation stance when it comes to AI systems. And this pushed us globally not to be on the waiting end for someone to develop technology regulations, but to also make sure that our voices are being heard and translated. And this translation of those voices, we can see them in the development cycle of the technologies, because it's not enough anymore for a technology provider to come and spoon feed you technology that's commercially viable, but not having societal values respected when it comes to looking into indigenous value of different regions. We have been hearing today about the contextual value of emerging technology when we are bringing, for example, agri-farming solutions to Brazil or agri-farming solutions to Africa. What does that mean? Do we have really some kind of societal values that we are, delivering to farmers on those different regions? What kind of trade hubs we are creating for them? What kind of opportunity access we're giving them? So technology is not anymore a convenient functionality. It's more of this kind of magnified ripple impact that we are looking for. And I think this is the impact of the BRICS. This is the impact of the G20. We are changing the way we are valuing technology companies. We're asking for more. We're asking for better governance structures on a new economic companies like OpenAI. We're asking for better governance structures on crypto stock exchanges and in new economic zones. And we are demanding that we have a bit of a better transparency when it comes to developing these technology and better of open access to those technologies.
You know, what a common theme I've heard from very different perspectives, otherwise on very different sets of issues, is this theme of sovereignty under cooperation, whether it's political, health, technological, energy. That seems to be a very common financial sovereignty. One last question before I open it up to the floor. If I can go back to Professor Panova, you mentioned you are involved in the W20, the Women 20. We haven't discussed gender specifically on the panel yet. What do you hope this can achieve in your discussions and your involvement in the W20? We'll give you a voice.
That's Western provocation one. Okay, so but it's not possible to take the voice again away from Russia as we see. So with the Women 20, we've been working from 2015. It was Turkey that initiated this process, and well, so far it's been about tackling all the issues of women empowerment. It's been in all areas that are relevant for each and every country. In certain areas, let's say Russia is more advanced with regards to equality between men and women and opportunities that are given, and thus we can be sharing our best practices. but in some areas there is still needs, certain things that need to be done, like entrepreneurship, providing for more financial inclusion. Now a very hot topic would be digital inclusion. Of course, once again, there are different levels of those problems that exist, let's say, in the West, in Arab countries, in Africa, in Asia. But at the same time, we do share the urgency of those issues to be put forward. And Women 20 and G20 is not the only forum where those issues are tackled, because if you remember, we've also launched within the BRICS the Women Business Alliance, which is quite successful, and it is also acting on development of ties between women entrepreneurs and providing for more economic cooperation between our countries. And in fact, if you look at, because we have our chairship, as Dr. Nikon have mentioned, this year we have academic and civil process, and within civil process we have 9 working groups, and each of them have part of it ingrained of women empowerment, or rather we are talking about equality of opportunities, because this is important, because I think no discrimination either way. What we see now is a paradox sometimes when we have an opposite discrimination towards men, which we don't want either. Women are more inclusive in this regard, and thus we're talking about this equality, which is ingrained in each and every topic within BRICS. And we're trying to put the same, and we're talking with our BRICS colleagues within the G20 as well, to have this approach pinned within their G20 and Women 20 as well.
Let's open up to questions, and what I thought I'd do is take a few. I see lots of hands up. We'll start with the gentleman in the front, and we'll take a few before going back to the panel, and then so right in the front, and then 2 in the back. And if you could please introduce yourself and keep it to 1 question.
Thanks so much. My name is Hallelujah. I'm a PhD student.
From
University of Oxford. And my question is, I think the joining of the new members of BRICS has significantly widened the economic and political spectrum within the members. And some of these members have a history of geopolitical competition in their own spheres. So my question is, their membership, do you think it can contribute to resolving or de-escalating their competition in their sphere of influence, or it can undermine the cohesion of BRICS? Thank you.
Do you mean this specifically at our Iranian colleague as well, because of Saudi Arabia and Iran being,
Not
or
only Saudi and
China
Iran,
and India as well?
Ethiopia and Egypt.
Ethiopia and
as
Egypt,
well.
yep. Yes. Lady first, yes. No. I think for the recording, we would benefit from a microphone. So just 1 second, it'll come to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, good morning. My name is Laura Marenbach. I'm from the Technical University of Munich. We've heard a lot in the past couple of days about AI and how important the opportunity is. And I know that it's a particularly big priority for the BRICS this year. We've heard the Russian presidency talking about it as sort of central to the agenda. We heard China talking about opening a new AI cooperation center in China. So I was just wondering if the panelists could comment on what you see as the specific opportunities of AI for the BRICS. What are the political interests, economic interests? What kinds of goals do they hope to achieve?
And right next to you.
Good morning. My name is Artyom. I'm a political science student from Moscow, from Russia. And thank you for fruitful conversation. And as it was mentioned, this year is a year of Russian presidency in BRICS. And if we will meet in the end of this year, in which case we can say that, yes, it was a great presidency of Russia in BRICS, which aims should be achieved by Russia and BRICS plus countries. How can we estimate it? Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe 1 last question in the front, and we'll go back to the panelists. We'll have about 12 minutes for the panelists to answer.
Thank you so much. I have a question for Professor Panova. Thank you again for your contributions to BRICS and also in...
I'm sorry, could you introduce yourself?
Sorry, my name is Aurel Niemek from the South African BRICS Think Tank Secretariat. In line with that, the relationship between academic research and policy making and bridging those worlds. To that end, I would like to know this year, what would Russia's priorities be in setting the agenda for research priorities that would contribute to effective leadership within BRICS and G20? Thank you.
Thank you. I think because some of the questions overlap, we have one last one. Yes.
Good morning. My name is Philipp Gieck from University of Würzburg in Germany, and I'm interested in hearing some comments on the initiative launched at the Delhi Summit last year, the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, which, to my surprise, wasn't mentioned at all.
So maybe we start over there with Oliver. Maybe the questions on geopolitical competition, particularly both of you. Maybe the question of geopolitical competition within BRICS. You know, maybe mention India, China, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Ethiopia, Egypt. How will they be navigated within BRICS?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that divergences between member states are common. I mean, you put any grouping in the world is likely to have some kind of divergence. I think. I think of course, when you read the BRICS declarations, I mean, they're the product of months-long haggling, sometimes until the night before the final publication, and that's common between member countries, and that has been the case over the past years, and I expect that to intensify as we now have a larger number of groups. Worst case, the final declarations will simply not mention any of these issues. I think that it's also natural that as we expand, some of the issues may be more difficult to find consensus on. Now, specifically vis-a-vis geopolitical tensions between member states, there's an interesting case where a few years back there was armed skirmishes between India and China, and there was a BRICS summit coming up. And it was quite interesting because the national security advisors, faced some pressure to get this done so that Xi and Modi could actually speak. And because otherwise it would have been quite awkward to have this meeting, whereas soldiers on both sides are getting killed in some of the border regions. So I think that's an interesting example of how the BRICS, interestingly enough, and perhaps somewhat counterintuitively, can actually help increase the number of dialogues between member countries, and thus, produce a regular encounter which may force both sides to, reduce tensions also. At the same time, I think that a lot of these tensions will, of course, remain. It's not like, thanks to BRICS membership, they will go away. But I also want to mention, which has been said here, the people-to-people ties is really quite significant. So I think that even, let's say, Saudi Arabia joins, and that may allow Saudi, bureaucrats and think tankers and decision makers to engage more frequently in an amicable context. And I think the same, in principle, should be true between Egypt and Ethiopia.
Excuse me.
Okay. So actually, if we talk about geopolitical rivalries or differences among a grouping, we could also see it in G20 as well. But they are sitting around the table and talk about tackling the problems in international economic system. What is important for BRICS is that they have more in common than differences, and that would help them for a better convergence than being in divergent. Actually, the addition of new members would further add to this to the advantages of G20. Just look at with the new members, what we call it BRICS Plus. There is a block of around which enjoys around 50% of the world population, 25% of world trade. And more important, because of the rising needs of the emerging economies in BRICS, that they would need the energy. Now 43% of the world energy, by the addition of Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Emirates, would be added to this grouping. And all these, the accessibility or through these new BRICS members to international markets through corridors, because the issue of corridor mentioned, there are also other corridors, North-South corridor, just around 20 years ago, Iran, Russia, and India, they agreed on the establishment of the INSTEC, the North-South corridor. So these are all the advantages that would keep BRICS as a proper ground for convergence among the member states. Thank you.
Sarah?
Okay, it's on now. Thanks for the questions. BRICS does not exist simply for economic trade. I think economic trade is important, and I think this is why I was emphasizing the people to people. I think most of what we are disagreeing about could easily be resolved if we know each other's histories, each other's civilizations. And I think in a world where there's a particular hegemony that is dominating the world and an ideology that's dominating the world, it is always easy to understand others who are telling us about themselves rather than what we also share in common and what we tell ourselves. So it is important that as we think about differences and what sets us apart, we also realize that it is the others who are telling us that we are different and therefore should not cooperate with each other. When we always start our engagements with BRICS, we always agree on what our values are. And one of them is mutual respect. And indeed, we spend until 2 a.m. in the morning trying to find those recommendations, guided by the values that hold us together. And mutual respect is at the center of that. And that is why every year, at least from the South Africa's BRICS think tank side, but also the BRICS think tank, we always come up with recommendations. There's never been a year where we come out and we don't have recommendations to the summit. And this is why also the summits can come out with final recommendations. So I think that is important for us, and this is why we talk about a successful BRICS, and we will continue to have a successful BRICS despite our differences. On technology, we have to realize that technology is often created to facilitate trade, to facilitate dialogue, to facilitate people-to-people exchanges or cultural exchanges. But at the heart of it is also to continue a particular status quo about how we generate a wealth in the world. And I think as part of BRICS, we want that technological advancement to benefit everyone equally. And this is why earlier on I was talking about about justice and global inequalities that we need to address. And this technology should not be at the detriment of us advancing and the world over benefiting, not certain parts of the world benefiting through this technology. And of course, we have been talking about how technology has been changing the world of work, where some are again excluded at the expense of a few who want to amass resources for themselves at the expense of the global south, of Africa, of others and at our expense. So I think those are the things that I think we need to be championing as we think about technology and South Africa sometimes, and as in the academic circle, we talk about technology, democracy, not technology apartheid. Thanks.
Professor Panova, there were two questions that directly addressed to you. One on, what specifically would you like to see as success? And the second question, would you be able to address those?
Thank you. I'll probably start, nevertheless, with expansion as a means to cohesion and then move to those two. Because I think we can say agree not despite our differences, but also thanks to our differences, because this is the key about BRICS. When we are talking to each other, we actually are happy and we're proud to be diverse. We're proud to be bringing in the new cultural experience, new historic experience, civilizational experience, and this enriches us. We don't deny what is interesting or different in the other BRICS member. And in fact, this makes the discussion flow, and this makes new ideas come like quite bravely and come to fruition. Because if you look even at very pragmatic things like trade, at the very beginning, everybody, oh, you're so in different, some of you in different parts of the world. How can you ensure trade cohesion? Nevertheless, what we were seeing, yes, it was a small base minimum, but at the same time, over the years of BRICS existence, trade and economic cooperation within BRICS grew at much higher levels than between each BRICS country and the outside world. So we are proving that we can look at those differences and provide for more coherence, and thus having more members would allow us to enrich ourselves even more. Of course, arithmetically, it can be more difficult, right, to agree which party to go to, right? But at the same time, when you respect each other, and this is another key principle for BRICS, when you respect each other, you do agree and you see partners' ability and partners' capabilities. With regards to what will be the success at the end of the year, and probably I'll intertwine it with the research priorities, because what is also key for Russia's chairship is that we very much intertwine official track and track 2 and 3. And I think it's happening in other BRICS countries as well, because we have this fruitful exchange of ideas. And if you look at many initiatives, successful ones like New Development Bank or Network University or STI, to name a few, all of those came from the expert level ideas and came to fruition and were taken by the leaders and fulfilled together by the society and governments of BRICS. And that is why if we look with the continuity from the South African chairship, then we would definitely see as a success integration of the new members, smooth integration, and ability to join all their enormous amount of groupings. Some of them institutionalized, some remain informal, but it's extremely dense and rich tissue, which we do want you to be part of. And if we manage, and I'm sure we will, because this would be a joint endeavor, not just Russia's chairship, this would be a success. Another issue that was raised, it was quite prominent on the agenda of South Africa, was payment mechanism instrument. This is a very difficult issue. I'm quite sure we will have to discuss it on all levels, between not just official track, but within our expert community. But this is a vital thing. Even if it doesn't get realized during this year, we have to provide for a solid platform with expertise, because this is something that would ensure our own financial and economic sovereignty and unhampered development. This is extremely important for us, so we cannot fail on that. I'm once again quite sure that, and I hope the pace would be rather faster than slower, that we'll manage this too. Another issue, it's not for us to kind of have it this year. It would be going to Brazilian chairship in 2025. But we're having the economic partnership strategy that is to end by next year. And we will have to think of the new document, which would already incorporate our new members, look at new directions, including technological advancement, infrastructure cohesion, trade to trade cohesion. So we will have to look at that, and I think we should not rely to start this process next year because it's to be over then, but we have to be dealing with it at this very moment, and this would be one of the areas of activities. Another continuity, if you remember, last year ministers of education issued initiative of BRICS ranking. Because so far we are kind of evaluated mostly by the outside world, by their global north. And from what we saw with the recent changes in certain rankings, they remain very politicized. And also, so two things: not to be judged from outside and not to have a politically ensured ranking. And I think this would be also important for us as an expert community to work on this matter. And last but not least, during previous Russia's chairship, we worked and elaborated indexes, BRICS index, which would also allow us to evaluate and allows us to evaluate our own performance, not by somebody from Canada, for example, as University of Toronto does. And that's what we're expecting to do this year as a result of expert community work, and we hope this will be useful for our officials. Thank you.
I failed in one of my moderator duties and time is up, but I think there were two questions addressed to Dhruva, and I would like her to take 5 minutes to quickly answer them. One on technology specifically, one on IMEC if you would like to, and if you're not, I can just give a 2-minute summary at the end.
No issues. A great question in AI, but we should not dilute the technological advancement and just abstract them in AI. I think emerging technology in general are opening new markets. And the thing to get out of this room understanding is that why are we investing in technology? It's because of that kind of 10x over 10x kind of investment returns factor. So it's a mechanism of getting into markets and getting that kind of return of investment faster into your own economy. However, it's very volatile and very uncertain in terms of return. So what countries are doing for technologies like AI, if we took AI as a business case or as an economic case, is they're using AI as a foundational technology that would make some kind of a ground ecosystem shifts across the different paradigms that you have. Which means that if you will invest in AI, you have to invest in as well parallel technologies. And we've said it yesterday, you have to invest in alternative computing, 5G, you have to invest in not just AI to make your AI case work, not just in AI governance, but an actual concrete science and technology and research agenda that will build a new constituents or new silos of building new technologies. On the longer run, this would give you an economic advantage. If you have a first market entry, like China, for example, you stand to invest maybe 200 billion, and at the end of the game, within the next 5 to 7 years, then you stand to gain 7 trillion in terms of global dominance and 15 trillion markets. So what we're trying to have in here is faster access to market dominance of technology development, and at the same time have that kind of transcended value across your different ecosystem to make sure that you are not living in inertia when it comes to capacity building, to science and technology development, to long-term asset development within your economy. The main realization for us to take away out of this is that we need to do this for all of emerging technology stack or semiconductors stacks and other, quantum computing, crypto, whatever not, anything that would get you into new economy zone because it pushes you into the emerging market zone faster than others, which means that you would have a faster economic growth on the longer run. So everything is intertwined. Even your question on economic trades, we did not yet discuss economic trades, but we discussed as well how the BRICS is focused on economic efficiency. And economic trades are meant to be that. This is why, for example, now in Dubai, we have an economic zone for India for any kind of a new venture and VC in India to have a faster access in existing in UAE market. and UAE market is known for being an amplifying market for new economies, for example. So this kind of one market region that is about to be established, regardless of your currency or regardless of your internal structures, is very important, and we're seeing it beyond the AI. So, I mean, the longer answer to your question, it's more than just an AI investment, it's an ecosystem investment at large.
Do you want to address IMEC quickly? And I have two sentences on that, if need be. The India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor.
Yeah, I mean, the clear example around that corridor is that we are not trying to build that trade treaty as just a short-term investment. It's a longer-term investment that existed prior to it being considered a corridor. What we took is the grander economic efficiencies of the two markets, India, UAE, and Middle East in general. And I think what UAE and India is trying to have is a trade platform that is having a long-term impact on anybody who's part of that platform in the longer run. We've seen many of the VCs going from the global north, I'm sorry for this definition, to India, and India being one of the largest global zones that attracts VC investments. But at the same time, there is a limitation of specific manufacturing capacity, and what the economic corridor allowed is for that spillover effect to happen, for that manufacturing capacity to be able to be relocated in the Middle East, and having that capacity being developed in the Middle East, and something that we call better than the transfer of technology effect, because when you transfer technology, you still have this kind of governance over export, the limitation for exportation roles. You don't transfer everything within the technology. But when you are following economic corridors, for example, that give you the bandwidth of building manufacturing units in different economic zones, you're also building the know-how, you're also building the development capacity, technology development capacity, and you're building, again, new jobs ecosystem within that structure. So I think it's bigger than what we are having at the moment and what we're defining at the moment. I mean, for the first time, UAE, India have said trading currencies could be any of mutual currencies that have been used within the two countries, which is quite empowering and eliminating a lot of the current economic inefficiencies that exist.
I think part of the reason we didn't hear about it on this panel in particular was it's 8 parties, of whom 4 are European, 1 is Saudi. So I mean, I don't think many of them are, apart from India and Saudi Arabia, really BRICS countries and G20, both BRICS and G20 members. But that being said, I think there's been a lot of discussion the last couple of days on IMEC, and my understanding is particularly the eastern corridor between the Gulf and India is progressing, if not accelerating in some ways, because of what we've seen happen in the Red Sea in the last few years. With that, please join me in thanking our panelists for a very wide-ranging discussion. Thank you again on behalf of ORF and the organizers of the Raisina Dialogue, and I hope the rest of you have a wonderful rest of your conference. Thank you.